Alright, I decided to redo my rust proofing video since I wasn't happy with the last one. These Ford Festivas, the bodies are sort of the same as the engine if you take care of it. You know, the engine, if you do regular oil changes and don't beat on them, they'll go 500,000 to a million miles. The body's the same way, just they don't typically get taken care of, so they'll rust out sooner. I never did any rust proofing to this car, and you know, the results are typical of a Festiva in the rust belt. But taking care of the body is a lot easier than taking care of the engine. A lot less work. To do the rust proofing the first time might take you a whole Saturday, cost 30 bucks, 40 bucks. Then if you do it once a year after that, maybe an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours if you want to do a lot of work to it. But it doesn't take a lot of time or money, and it makes a big difference. So I'll talk about what I decided to use later. You can use a lot of different things to rust proof with. You can buy wax oils or aerosol cans of stuff to spray on there. You can use canola oil, any type of vegetable oil, used motor oil. What is common to use is like a rubberized undercoater or rust paint. They typically don't work very well because it's hard to get both sides. On places where you can get both sides, they work fine. But an area like this, you can see the rust coming through here, but it did not start on the outside or the inside. It starts, if you can see it in the middle, where the two panels meet. In the gap in between is where the rust starts. And it's very difficult to get a rust paint or a rock guard in there. The rust starts in the gap between these panels and works its way to the outside of the panels. So if you only put rust paint or rock guard, or like what I smeared on here on the outside, it actually makes things worse because it doesn't dry out as well. You need to be able to get something that'll go in between this panel or where the two sections meet. Same as like here, you can see where that seam is rusted. You need to be able to get an oil in behind that seam to stop the rust. Just painting rust paint over it isn't enough. You need to be able to, the way the rust paint works is it seals out water and air, which is required to make rust. But if you don't totally encapsulate it with that, it doesn't work. So I'll show what I used later, but what you want to do is get the car up on jack stands as far off the ground as you can. Pressure wash it, clean it all on the outside as well as you can. And if you have a lot of bare rust, take like a needle scaler or a wire brush, take off everything that you can, unless you're going to start making a lot of holes. But take off what you can, and then you'll need to clean the inside as well, and inside the frame rails, everything else. This takes kind of the most amount of time, but if you don't get all the dirt out, or I should back up, when you drive, your car fills up with dust and dirt inside the panels. This has been cleaned a bit already. When it gets wet from driving, like I drove this morning in the rain, it's still wet in here. It was actually snow, not even rain. So if this is full of dust, it turns into mud, which takes forever to dry out, and that's, your panels stay wet for forever, and that's why they start rusting. So take your interior panels off if you have the time, if you can. Just take a rag and a bucket of water and wipe out your panels, wipe all the dust out. And underneath you'll want to, hopefully you're able to take an air compressor, go underneath the car, which hopefully doesn't look this bad, and find all the holes like this, and anywhere else along the frame rail, like that one. At the very back there's some more. Back here, blow all the dust that you can out of those holes. It's incredible how much dust comes out. Down these frame rails as well, all these holes, blow all the dust out. That may end up taking you the longest time of everything to get all the dust out, but need to get it out of there so that you don't get water staying in there and have problems like this, where because the mud just stays in there, it never dries, it rusts all the way out and you got nothing left. So you blow everything out, and then you need to find your drain holes, which I'll show. They'll be easier to find on my other car, but there's drain holes in the pinch welds in the back panel, and blow all them out with the compressed air to make sure they're not plugged. Drain holes in the bottom of the doors right here. There's a few of them along the door. They need to stay clear, otherwise the water stays in your panels and doesn't drain. So once you have everything blown out and cleaned, everything's ready, then take whatever you're spraying on and spray it in all these holes. Kind of fill these frame rails with it. Spray it at the back of this pinch weld and the whole bottom. I did the whole bottom of my new Festiva. This one's too rusty to bother with. This hole, what you really want to spray at is this rear beam where it mounts to the frame. Rusts out in between the rear beam and the frame. That's where it rusts. This just rusts right off the car. So spray a whole bunch in it through this hole. There's holes above it back here, spray down at it. I think there's an alignment hole or something in here you can spray through. On my new car, I actually took the rear beam off, coated everything, sprayed through the bolt holes, and just made sure everything had a lot of wax oil in it. These holes, spray through them, spray each direction, everywhere. At the very back you can spray in. Again, I did the whole underside through all these. You can see where the rust is. That's kind of where you want your rust preventative to go, so that you don't have this type of problem. Then these rear bumpers get filled with dirt and rust right out too. They're a bit of work to take off. If you have the time, it's worthwhile removing this, cleaning all the dirt out of it and filling it with wax oil, because I've had bumpers that were so bad you could just push your finger right through here. They'd rusted out so bad, and you need these in a collision. They do a lot. They do most of the what you want to happen in a collision. So you don't want them rusted out. So if you have the time, remove them, clean them out, fill them with wax oil, stick them back in, buy a new one if yours is bad. Further up, the other frame rail as well. Then you want some around where this lower control arm mounts to the frame. Right there, and then on your lower rad support, you want rust proofing where any metal goes through, like where the bolts go through. You need some there so that it doesn't pull right out. There's holes in the end of it, I believe, and in the front, like there, you can spray some in. Well, you can see how rusty things are here. Just cover everything with it. Same with this front rebar. It does not get as full of dirt as the rear, obviously, but you can spray some wax oil in there. Then along the bottom on the outside, the main problem areas are obviously this wheel well, because you get rust in that folded over seam where the two panels meet, the outer quarter panel and the inner. So you want lots of wax oil in there. I would coat this whole area with it up behind this lip, make sure it's clean, and try and spray into this. If your car is perfectly rust free, you can try and seal it with seam sealer or epoxy or whatever you want to use. Then the next worst spot is obviously the rocker panel, because all the rocks hit it. So if you don't have rust, rock guard is a good idea. You can apply 3M film tape to it, to the outside, to prevent the rocks from chipping right through the paint. But you need to rust proof it from the inside as well. So on each side there's a plug here. You can remove this plug, spray inside. There's a few drain holes in this pinch weld. You need to poke up through, blow up through it, make sure they're clear, spray some rust proofer through that to make sure you got the drain hole as well. And then you'll go from the inside, pop this cover off. I'll just go to the other side. Pop that trim panel off, and then the carpet just pulls up, and pull the carpet back, and they're missing on this car, but there are plugs here, and you spray through there into the rocker panel. Fill that with wax oil. There's some openings here, you can spray through that. There's plugs farther up that you can spray through there. These plugs go all the way along. That's what they look like. There's a nice big hole back by your seat belt that's easy to spray through. Back here, if you're able to take this panel off, you can spray down inside here. It's hard to see, but you can get down into the rocker there. Just spray everything there. Like on this car, the bolts for the seat belt are too corroded to take off. Then a problem area is the floor pan, because if you live where there's snow like I do, you get in and out of your car, you get lots of snow, water, mud in the foot area, and it doesn't dry out. The carpet keeps it wet and it rusts from the inside. There are drain holes like that one there you can see, but it's not really sufficient because the carpet stays wet. So I think your best bet, if there is no rust whatsoever on this floor pan on your car, take like a rubberized gravel guard and do the whole footwell from, you know, here back to here, up the side, all the way up. You can see my rust has come all the way up the side, because I always got in here with wet boots, and that should seal the water out. But make sure you keep those drain holes, because they are important, otherwise the water just never leaves. If you do have rust, probably just use the wax oil on here, or motor oil, whatever you're going to use, and then get like some sort of boot tray that has high sides. It'll keep the water in if possible. Knock the snow off your boots before you get in. Then the rear panels, to gain access to them, you can spray up from that plug I showed you, but you need to be able to get on top of this wheel well here, in that seam. In between here is where the rust starts, in between these two panels where they touch, water sits because of surface tension, and that's where your rust starts. So you want to spray lots in here. You can get to it from here if you're willing to take these panels off. You can also remove the panel here and just spray up on top back there. You can remove the tail light, just 4 bolts, and then you got a straight shot through the back of the tail light. If you're able to take this panel off, typically you'll start getting rust along these seams, so you can spray a little there. It's worse on this side. Just spray a bit around there. Never plug these areas like I did. There are drain holes in here to let water out. It gets wet in here when you drive in the water, and the water needs to be able to get out. So on my other car I'll show you where the drain holes are. But you want to coat all this with that wax oil or whatever it is you're using. Then on the doors, there's an access hole or a plug here, and you've got the 3 drains in the bottom like this. Those drains need to be clear. You can spray up through them, kind of each side. You can spray through this hole, and you can see where the outer and inner panel meet is where the rust starts. The water gets in that gap and sits there because the surface tension doesn't really leave. If it's not hot where you are, it doesn't evaporate right away. And that outer panel wraps around, so the water sits in the very bottom. Like this right here is the outer skin wrapped around. There is seam sealer over this, but as the seam sealer gets old, it falls off. This was the seam sealer. So then you get water from the outside draining out right into that gap. So you want to make sure your seam sealer stays in good shape. If it's starting to deteriorate, take it off, replace it. And make sure when you do that it provides a smooth surface for the water just to run off and it doesn't trap water. If you're not going to do that, just make sure you get a lot of wax oil in this gap. Any folded seams like that will catch water, rust. Here's another one, the back of the hatch. Like there was seam sealer here, but where the drain is and water sits is starting to come off. And you get rust there. Same as the other door, same as the hood. On some cars, I don't think it's too bad on this one, but the hood is slanted down. You've got a seam there, which is still mostly seam sealed on here. But you get rust starting here, so watch your seam sealer. Spray rust proofing there if you like. That's about it for the door. The back hatch, oh, I thought I could show you inside, but if you pop this panel off, typically this isn't here. I put it here for insulation for the winter. But you've got access holes. You got these drain holes that you need to keep clear. There's one there, I think there's one in the middle. There's another one here. There's another one here. Spray through them. Blow out through them first if you haven't wiped it out from the inside. Where these rust typically would be anywhere where the license plate hits. So make sure your license plate is not rubbing through anywhere. Seems to me that all Festivas have a hole right here. I don't know why. You can do whatever you want with it. I put a screw through mine and kind of gobbed some stuff on it. But anywhere where your license plate hits, you will get rust. Every vehicle basically where the wiper arm comes through, you get rust. Make sure you do whatever necessary. Put some extra paint on. Put wax oil on it. It always seems to be around the window. You start getting rust. Again, typically comes from the inside, can come from the outside. This is the seam where the water sits on the inside. Rust there, so you got to make sure those drain holes stay clean and spray wax oil in there. Other popular spots are where emblems are. This car doesn't have emblems anymore, but anywhere around an emblem will start rusting like that. So I would coat the whole inside with whatever rust proofing you're using. I'm just going to show you where the drain holes are now on this car, ones to look for. This is my nicer Festiva. It doesn't have all the drain holes plugged with spray foam and seam sealer. The first one's at the front of the rocker panel. Underneath on the pinch weld there, it drains the inside. So you look at the rocker panel and look for kind of bumps out like that. shove a piece of wire or blow compressed air up there, compressed air preferably. You can see there's a drain hole there, it's got dirt in it. Also, just ahead of it here, you've got the drain hole for your cowl, so all the water that runs off your windshield into the cowl drains through here. You'll want to spray some rustproofing around that hole to keep that from rusting. Then head to the back of the rocker. Other vehicles may have some in the middle. You see another bump out right about here. You can see the drain there. So again, just clean this out. That's where all the water from the frame rail drains, as well as the well, actually the frame rail drains here, so you also want it in that hole. The rocker drains there. Then you'll see, just like on the doors, the seam sealer is coming off here, and that's going to start rusting. So you either redo the seam sealer or you spray rustproofing on it. Then head into the wheel well area, and on Festivas you can see a little hole there. Right behind it is where the drain hole is, and clean that out. Compressed air or this wire. You can see inside the car where it comes through. You can see it behind my mess there. So it drains between the pinch weld to the outer quarter panel and the inner quarter panel skin. And obviously you need rustproofing in there, but I was going to show you the different rustproofers that I tried. You can use used engine oil or canola oil thinned down, or you can buy cans of it. This one was a bit more expensive. I didn't like it quite as much, made by Proform. Description there. This is the one I ended up liking, fluid film. It's only like 14 bucks a can. So that's a piece of unpainted metal. This is the fluid film, just kind of how it sprays. And the Proform. So they do stay on there fairly well, but they will run into crevices. I think this one runs a little bit better, but it also, a thick enough film stays wherever you sprayed it.